what's better than earning money from a 9-to-5 job? It's earning money while you sleep, which is made possible if you start investing. You're listening to the Real Estate Investing Demystified with your very own dynamic duo, Ava Benisaki and August Biniaz. Tune in as we discuss everything real estate, both on the passive and active sides. We feature life-changing stories of today's real estate leaders that will help build your own roadmap to success. This is a show that will lead you to a diversified portfolio, a much bigger revenue, and a next-level venture that brings you a smooth cash flow. Let's get this episode started.
Hi everyone, August Biniaz with Real Estate Investing Demystified. We're here in Vancouver at the CoStar event, and we are with CoStar's chief economist, Carl Gomez. How are you doing today, Carl?
Great, thanks. Nice to see you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. I was learning so much, you standing on stage, but I've been, our firm CPI Capital, our focus is U.S. real estate, U.S. multifamily. We're watching the numbers and data coming out of the U.S. very closely. Talk to us, you talked a lot about Bank of Canada, you talked about the Fed. You also talked about inflation numbers. In the U.S., the numbers that we look at is the 10-year Treasury minus the 2-year Treasury. We're looking at SOFR, secured overnight financing rate. When it comes to Canada, what is the equivalent of Fed's funds rate and SOFR in Canada?
So the equivalent for the Fed funds rates is the Bank of Canada policy interest rate. So they call it the overnight interest rate. And so that's basically the main pricing for prime rates for borrowing by businesses. The 10-year Government of Canada bond yield is probably the same as the 10-year Treasury. And again, that's determined by the market as opposed to the central bank itself.
Got it. And that secure overnight financing rate is what banks lend to each other in the U.S. That's a number that's kind of has a spread over it, the Fed's funds rate.
Yes.
Do we have something, is that called prime in Canada? What is
so that's the prime rate. So that's based off of the Bank of Canada's overnight rate that they lend back to the banks themselves, and that establishes a prime lending rate that basically, it's a shorter term variable product that depends on what the central banks charge.
Got it. Let's talk about CoStar a bit. I mean, I was talking to my associate here, and for us, when we were looking to acquire property, mainly focus on multifamily value add in the U.S., not having a CoStar report is insanity. The brokers actually give you the CoStar report, but there's so much data, so much information. You guys actually in the U.S. actually have team members that are calling people that have recently sold the property, getting hands-on data. How are you guys as sophisticated here in Canada as the U.S.? Are you guys kind of trying to, of course you have a dog in the race, but you're gonna.
Yes.
But talk to us about the growth of CoStar in Canada and kind of the way you collect your data.
Sure. I mean, CoStar in the United States is kind of like the Amazon of commercial real estate. It is really the go-to place. CoStar has been in the United States for several decades and is the only place to get reliable commercial real estate information with technology. In Canada, CoStar has not entered Canada since we came in 2015. And it takes some time to understand the real estate market. The real estate market can be not very transparent, getting information. And so we've had a couple years of trying to get our footing in Canada, but we've kind of got to a place now where we have over 100 people in Toronto, a dedicated research team in Canada, now searching the market. We've got hundreds, thousands of properties that we cover in Vancouver, Toronto, Calgary, Edmonton, Ottawa, Montreal, all the major markets in the country, taking every single inventory of every single property. So we are developing and getting to the point where we are in the United States, and definitely ramping up. So the information is getting there. It's a great go-to source for all your fundamental information in real estate. We have a network of different people that we work with and different ways of doing it, but it is certainly becoming one of the main providers of commercial real estate information in Canada.
I bet, much needed. I mean, a much needed vacuum that exists here. I wanted to chat with you about kind of understanding the market, something that's been, for me, a fascinating topic and somewhat of a mystery. It's the culture, the investing culture that exists in Canada. I relate it to a lot of immigrant population that come here, a lot of people bringing and parking money here. But when you have, and I talked to a lot of commercial brokers, particularly multifamily brokers about this, is why would somebody buy something at a 3 cap when the interest rates are at 6 or 7, when they're massively under leveraged, and the response to me always is they are in the business of capital preservation. They just want to save their money, and they're riding on the fact that there's going to be natural market appreciation, which is going to surpass their negative rent growth, negative leverage. So as an economist, somebody who understands, I mean, I feel very uneducated being next to you, but is that something that it comes into the calculation, and where commercial real estate is supposed to be separate from residential because commercial real estate has no emotion in it.
Right.
But in this scenario, it seems like there's emotion involved.
Yeah, it's a good point. Like, why would you invest in a multifamily, investment with a 2.5-3% cap rate when you can get 5% or 6% in a GIC? It seems like it doesn't make a lot of sense, and in many ways, it doesn't. Why you get a better return that's locked in, guaranteed at 6%, but your 3.5 going in cap rate could gain you a better return if for some reason property prices appreciate. And I think that's a little bit of speculation. It's more speculation.
That's all it is. It's speculation investing. 100% textbook speculation investing.
It's a bet. It's a speculative bet. But what's the problem is that for most people who have been making those bets for 20 years, they've been right.
25 years. S&P 500 has been around 100 years and has hit 8% cumulative returns. Why not just park it there instead of Vancouver, which has only done it for the last 25?
Because the opportunity to get the pop is what people are after. There is a little bit of mania attached to this. I mean, real estate is an emotional investment, and people get very attached to the real estate story and the feel of it and everything else. So there's a lot of that that's attributed to it. That's not to say that there isn't fundamental value here. The value is there in the land. They're not making more of it. It is constrained. There's a lot of population growth and all that. But to your point, is the return compensating you for all that risk that's out there? And I think for a lot of people, it's just speculative more than anything else.
Got it. And that's so my thinking, my logic does make sense. I'm not a contrarian, but it does make sense. Okay, great. So now let's talk about, you talk about population growth. We're sitting in Vancouver, a huge immigrant city, has one of the best foods in the world. I went to, I travel the U.S. a lot. I live part-time in Florida. It's great, the type of food that we have. A lot of people coming here, creates commerce, creates business. A lot of wealthy people as well, from China, from Iran, from India. A lot of kind of middle classes growing in India. A lot of people are coming. But we also have a lot of people that come here who are either skilled workers or students, which we have universal health care here. We have public assistance. They could possibly, in some cases, be a burden to the economy. Is that, as an economist working with CoStar, is that something you're looking at as this influx of immigration coming in, and could it possibly be a burden rather than being a stimulant for the economy?
Oh, 100%. And I think the governments are already reevaluating the kind of immigration that they pushed on, which was a lot of temporary workers, student populations. A lot of them are not productively contributing back to the economy, but they're using the resources that are there. And those resources are not just healthcare, it's housing and infrastructure that's sorely lacking in Canada. So the population growth that we saw more recently, with a lot of temporary people coming into the country and shooting up population growth at 3%, probably wasn't the greatest idea. And obviously now the government's understood that and now is trying to find ways to unwind that. Unfortunately, that's going to be a negative to overall economic growth, because just by virtue of having so many more people, it's been growing the economy, but not in a way that's been productive. And so I think the government needs to kind of revalue, and Canada absolutely needs more immigration. Our natural birth rates are going down, so from natural increases, we need population growth to continue. But I think the way the government did this was probably not well thought out in the end of the day. That has put pressure on housing resources, infrastructure resources, healthcare resources, and so now we need to kind of move that back a little bit.
Well, make it easier for the native people. I'm like native meaning the somewhat immigrant. I want to be politically correct here as well, but make it easier for native people who are here to have better lives for their families, so they'll have more kids, because it's a burden. I talk about people that I want to have 5 kids. I'm on my second one now. I just had my first baby boy. I'm having my second baby boy on January 1st, God willing. But if the government makes it a bit easier, and cost of living comes down a bit, it makes it easier for people who want to have kids. But that seems to be kind of difficult for people who want to do that.
It's getting harder and harder for the average family to be able to survive. one of the things that I've always been advocating as an economist is that the government's put a very big focus on bringing more people in and population growth and, giving people opportunities to take on more debt to afford housing. But they've done little to kind of ensure that we've seen the long run growth of household incomes. And how do we see the long run growth of household incomes? Well, we encourage productivity, investment in businesses, to pay people more, to have skilled workers, and all of those factors. And you do see it in the United States, where they have much more productivity than Canada. Average household incomes are much higher as well. Those are the problems that are going to create long-term issues for Canada when you don't create productivity, when you don't create household income growth, because the average person today is now struggling to afford to buy that home because so many people are competing with it. The only way you're going to be able to improve affordability long run is raise those incomes, and that is not happening. So I think that's a major policy problem for Canada.
Medium home, to give some unbelievable stats here for some of our viewers. Medium home price in Vancouver, I believe, is 2.1 million. Medium income is just over 100,000. How could that person even fathomably afford that? But let's take the conversation back to CoStar. Are you guys nationwide across Canada in all provinces?
Yeah, we cover the 6 major cities in the country and all surrounding regions as well. As we've always said,
what are those 6 major cities?
So we do Vancouver, Calgary and Edmonton, Toronto, Montreal, and Ottawa.
Got it. And let's talk about a kind of a wild horse here. Let's talk about rent control, right? So Vancouver has rent control, strict rent control. Toronto has strict rent control. Alberta doesn't. Yeah. So when you have providing stats, and we have one of the panel speakers talking about 10% average rent growth over the next 5-7 years, which I think is very wishful thinking, but optimistic, bullish. But when rent control comes a factor, when you're researching data, how does that affect your data? Because a lot of those units, the tenants will renew. They will not renew. Their contract stays in place, and the landlord has to pay up a big money to get those people out. So in a lot of cases, they might not do that. I think their rent increases at inflation is 2.5% or so. I'll be Vancouver and Toronto. Give us your thesis on rent control across Canada. I'm a big opponent of rent control. I've written articles about rent control and how it creates dilapidated properties and landlords not wanting to put money back and deferred maintenance and what have you. But give us your economist view of rent control and how it affects it. Not that just purely numbers and math, please.
Well, the pure math, and lots of economists have already talked about this. The problem with rent control is when you artificially weigh down prices, and rent is a price, what you're doing is going to constrain something on the supply side because you're already driving demand. And so theoretically, rent controls have always been, not advocated by economists, because what you're doing is creating a market externality by inducing a constraint on supply. And that's exactly what we've seen in Canada because of the rents artificially being held down and not to market. Many developers who create the supply for homes do not come out in the market, which is very different than the United States. In the United States, when rents start to accelerate, developers come out, they build a lot of supply, sometimes too much supply.
Sometimes hyper supply, which is an issue in the U.S., has never really been an issue in Canada that I've ever heard of.
If people are concerned about where rents are and advocacy for people who are paying those rents, the one thing you see in the United States is rents actually go down. And that's a great thing because oversupply means that rents move with where the market could be. Unfortunately, in Canada, that's not the case. You're stuck at a rental rate and prescribed to grow at a certain level. So the problem with that is that the market, the actual market rate in Canada can be completely disconnected from where the market actually is. And that's why the supply gets constrained, is because there's a distortion created in the market. I would say that the biggest problem for Canada right now is the fact that, 40, 30 years of rent controls have led to a huge deficiency in actual supply for multifamily. And now when developers are now starting to come out and build, they still can't build at a rate that's affordable for most people, so they're seeing a lot more vacancy in the new units that are there. There's no trickle down that's happening. And the whole problem with that stems from the fact that nobody wanted to build given the rent controls that were there had suppressed rents to a level that wasn't economic to build.
Yeah. To compound that as well, Canada has one of the highest adjusted for currency exchange and what have you, one of the highest construction costs in the modern world as well. So
Well, I mean, the other side is, to get around the construction costs. And the construction costs are very expensive. Development cost charges in Toronto, Vancouver are, as you pointed out, some of the highest in the developed world. But then you layer onto that, all the other due diligence that you have to do as a developer, whether
municipalities and the fees you have to pay to them.
all the excessive fees, environmental fees, and ongoing fees, the slow process of getting entitlement.
And that kills. When you have debt on a project and you're paying on a construction debt 10, 12%, that erodes away most of the gains.
Time is money, and so that becomes the biggest problem or constraint around supply. As I've always said too, the other issue here is not so much that we can't build supply. We have tried to build supply, but we can't do it productively. And so we have to throw more resources, more effort to get the same amount of output that, in the United States, they can do double. And that's the problem in Canada. Like when I talk about productivity in Canada, one of the least productive sectors in the country is construction. And it's construction because it's encumbered by a lot of frictions of the development stages. There's inefficiencies built into the system, which are purely can be fixed by reducing the bureaucracy that's there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Let's talk about market cycle. Last couple of questions. Market cycle, real estate goes in cycles. You got recession, recovery, expansion, hyper supply. It goes around, 10 to 15 years. You talked about mania, which is another kind of part of the market cycle that exists. If you look at particularly Canadian real estate market, I know there's single family residential, there's the commercial, there's multifamily, there's industrial, but overall, if you kind of look at a 30,000 view of the Canadian real estate market, if 12 o'clock was top of the market and 6 o'clock was the bottom of the market, like the worst time, recession, really bad, what time is it today?
Oh, I think we're close to 6 o'clock. We're right there in terms of a bottom for the market. All the seeds are kind of shown that basically, GDP growth is not growing in its potential. It may not be negative, it may not be recessionary, but it's certainly not growing fast enough to absorb all the resources that are there in providing enough growth for standard of living. So I think we're kind of at a bottom of a cycle right now. There's two ways of looking at that. It's painful to be at the bottom of a cycle, but it's also a positive because that's when the opportunities start presenting themselves. Absolutely. So,
even distress.
Well, and there's distress in the land market right now. There's a lot of people feeling distress because the residential markets have slowed down. People sitting with land that they're not getting income on. It's creating this distress. There are people with capital that can kind of go into those markets. They could look back 10 years and say this was a great time to be an investor, Absolutely. Right? And that usually is the case. So
awesome. Yeah. Last question: if a developer, an investor, an investment firm here's our interview, they want to learn more about CoStar, how can they get in touch with your firm, your guys?
Yeah, well, we're totally available on the internet. I'd say, go visit www.costar.com.
Oh, .com, so it's not a .ca?
There is a .ca as well, but .com is our U.S. entity. We're all the same. Definitely, visit us on the web, be able to contact you. We have dedicated sales folks that would come out and, give you a demo of our product. Our product is, technologically advanced, a touch of a fingertips. You can understand a building that's right in front of you, whether through a map search or any sort of other thing. It's a great tool to have, and if you're anybody involved in real estate these days, you need to have that.
No brainer. Carl, thank you so much, my friend. I really appreciate it. Thank you.